All right, there comes a time where you can only lie for so long. Former chief of staff of Biden has wrote a book now. See, all the books are coming out now.
So just how worried were Biden aides before the former president's disastrous debate last summer? According to Ron Klain, his chief of staff, his concerns could not be overstated. The former Biden chief of staff spoke to the journalist Chris Whipple for his new book that details last year's unconventional race. And just 4 days before the debate, Klain recalled that Biden didn't know what Trump had been saying and couldn't grasp what the back and forth of the campaign was. And at his first meeting with Biden for debate prep, quote, Klain was startled. He'd never seen Biden so exhausted and so out of it. Biden was unaware of what was happening in his own campaign. Halfway through the session, the president excused himself and went off to sit by the pool. In a statement to CNN, Klain said the excerpts from the book distorted his meaning. He says, I had no doubts then or now about the president's mental acuity. My point was that he was exhausted from travel and sick and overly focused on foreign affairs and detached from domestic policy. He says that Biden wasn't in the flow on the arguments of the campaign and was focused on Ukraine.
Really? No, you know exactly what you meant. Come on, let's be honest with each other now. Let's be honest. Let the honesty flow. Let it flow out.
I am not sure that is the defense that he thinks it is.
And here's the bottom line, having nothing to do with the excerpt. That special counsel who interviewed President Biden about why he had the files in his garage, I mean, his ultimate conclusion was basically Biden wasn't up, like he shouldn't be prosecuted out of sympathy. He's an elderly man. He's an elderly man who has a very bad memory and doesn't remember anything that happened.
Ashley, do you feel lied to?
Yeah, I do. I hadn't been around the president before that debate, and I worked for Joe Biden, and if the people around him knew that he was not capable, it is unacceptable to me that they allowed him to go onto that stage. I deserve better as a voter.
So now you're seeing that the truth is starting to leak out a lot more, right? You're starting to see that people are finally admitting, people on Joe Biden's side, they're starting to come out. We're writing books now. And now there's nothing to lose. Joe Biden's not going to be president again, obviously. Kamala Harris is not going to obviously be president. So people are coming out. They're telling the truth. Now, the American people did see in the first debate that was, obvious that Joe Biden's mental acuity wasn't there. But it wasn't like it started in July 2024. I mean, his mental acuity, his mental capacity was declining back in 2023 for many people who have spoke on it, definitely sometime in 2024. So people knew long before the election. I think people were just hoping that he could get through it. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people on the Democratic side were talking about how his mental was there, and the president is fully aware what's going on. He's in great mental shape. They were saying this all the way up until we couldn't avoid it anymore. So it's good to see the truth come out. It's sad that we had to go to a point where, look, at the end of the day, the way they put Kamala in there, all of a sudden, it was because we couldn't avoid what we saw. But these books coming out, again, in history, I think when it's all said and done, people are going to look back at the Biden years, particularly the last year, 2024. I think they're going to look back on that as something that was a black eye for the Democrats as far as lying and saying that he was mentally aware of what's going on. Although him and Trump are somewhat similar in age, I believe Trump is a little bit younger. I forgot their exact age difference.
I know that Joe Biden is a friend, but in this excerpt, the part about the pool, he went off, this is in the middle of debate prep, went off to the pool and he took a nap. And that was before the biggest debate of this campaign. That's not even the governance of the country. So Joe Biden, maybe he has the best intentions. I'm sure that you believe that. But the right decision, it seems pretty unequivocally, is that he should not have run for re-election.
Look, I was also just texting with Ron Klain, and who vehemently says he was taken out of context. I'll tell you my experience, which is what I can talk about. I've known Joe Biden for over 25 years. Certainly, the Joe Biden today is not the Joe Biden of 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago. It's not.
That happens when you get older and your mental starts to decline. We know that. We saw that.
But also, I will tell you, and I think that comes out also in the book and the excerpt that I read, something clearly happened that day, around those days, that was not the case the day after. I saw Joe Biden 24 hours after that debate here in New York. He was a completely different person. I saw Joe Biden when he came to The View after he dropped out, and he was a completely different person than what we saw at that debate. What happened around those days? I don't know. And can I tell you something? I don't care, because I want to talk about the future and how we fight Donald Trump and how we get rid of Donald Trump.
And she don't want to talk about it now. Of course you don't want to talk about it now. But the reality is that with dementia, it shows sometimes and then it doesn't show. That's the thing about dementia. Sometimes you seem perfectly okay. Other times you do not. So she may have saw him 24 hours later and he seemed how normal to her eyes and ears. But, it is important to talk about this because, like I said, everybody knows. See, this is damage control. And anybody that's close to Biden is going to say this, but they lied to the American people. They lied a lot in 2024. And let's put it like this. Had that debate in July, that the first and only debate really that Joe Biden had with Donald Trump, had that debate went a little bit better, even if Joe Biden lost the debate and you didn't really see any level of mental decline, they would have let him keep going. He would have kept going, knowing what they know. You know what I'm saying? They would have kept going. And honestly, had he got lucky enough to have a couple of debates with Donald Trump and the American people didn't see the mental decline, I think that he would have kept running all the way up until election. Can you imagine if people had voted Joe Biden in and you didn't actually have a chance to really see the mental decline and he had beat Donald Trump? You would have had somebody in office right now mentally who isn't there. That's why we should talk about it, because I think people should really think back and recollect what was said and what was done during that time of 2024. It's actually pretty bad. And again, this is in lieu of people writing books now. His aide wrote a book. There was another person that wrote a book. I forgot his name right now, but he wrote a book regarding. He's a Democratic insider. I did a video on this a couple days ago about how he talked about Barack never wanting to endorse Kamala and all the chatter within the Democratic Party as far as wanting to do a not a caucus, but to do a primary.
But you know what? He was not a completely different person. He did the Stephanopoulos debate interview to try to save him. He did your show to try to save him. He just he's the guy who's in his mid-80s. I'm not faulting him.
He
just don't want it. Just don't want the truth. Look at it. I just can't embrace the truth. I gotta squirm. I gotta move. I gotta move around. I have to say something. No, he wasn't. Like I just finished saying, he was not okay.
Wasn't the Joe Biden who was elected 4 years before.
He wasn't the one.
And his family should have pulled the plug.
I said that.
Well, they
His
should
own
have,
family
and so
should have
should
pulled
his
the plug.
advisors. I mean, talk about a big cover-up. I mean, we've been talking a lot about Donald Trump lately. I just want to ask a simple question. Who in the heck was running the country? If the president's mental acuity was in question and some days he's on and some days he's off.
And that's an old ass question. That's what everybody was saying in 2024 who was aware, at least after that first debate. Everybody was saying like, yo, this is the guy running the country. This is the guy who has his hand on the button, quote unquote. This is the guy who's supposed to deal with domestic and foreign affairs. And he is out of it at this debate. That was the question everybody asked. But at that time, nobody wanted to talk about it. They said his mental acuity is still there. And at that point, they were in the process of shoving Kamala Harris down our throats. And let's not talk about Joe Biden anymore. That's where they was at the time. So who was running the country? CNN should know that answer. No, well, I won't say nobody, but it sure as hell wasn't Joe Biden.
Was the guy really capable of doing the job day to day? I honestly really question that. And I think a lot of Democrats who said at the time, oh, Joe Biden is the fittest guy in the world. He could do backflips. He could jump into the pool, run marathons, do 100 push-ups. When every freaking person who saw Joe Biden said, there's no in hell this guy is physically fit. But they told us, don't believe your lying eyes because we're with him every single.
Well, this is why so much credibility has been lost in that party, because of clear lies. Don't believe what you see with your eyes. And again, like I said, had people not saw it at that first debate, they weren't going to tell you or us. They weren't going to tell us. They were going to keep going, and they tried to prop up that lie until they couldn't anymore. That he was so fit, he was so aware of everything, and he's in great shape for his age, and blah 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 blah. And now we're starting to deal with it because someone close to him is writing the book.
Day,
Can I
it
just
wasn't
add
true.
One more
It
piece,
wasn't true.
just so people understand the other part of this. Ron Klain was talking about how Joe Biden seemed obsessed with what the world thought of him. Klain wondered, half seriously, according to the book, if Biden thought he was president of NATO instead of the U.S. Quote, he just became very enraptured with being the head of NATO. That wouldn't help him on Capitol Hill because, as Klain noted, domestic political leaders do not care what Macron and Schultz think. And he was running for re-election.
Here's what I will say. I try and be an honest broker when I talk about things on this show. And I do think that that does not always happen with other guests. What we are
Present
learning.
company excluded, right?
Present company.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
What we are hearing right now is unacceptable to me. And I am a Democrat. And I think in order for this country to get back on the right track, when things like this are exposed, we have to call balls and strikes right and wrong. That night of the debate was terrifying for many, many reasons. It was scary. It hurt my heart, but it was very clear that that might not have been the first time. And I find that unacceptable. I would find that unacceptable in a Trump administration, in an Obama administration, in a Bush administration, and in a Biden administration.
Why do you
All
think
right, we
that
gotta
it
leave
wasn't
it
the
there.
first time?
We really have to.
Why did she think it wasn't the first time? Yo, that dementia, that wasn't the first time. Wow, what a crazy question. It's good to see truth come out. It's unfortunate, obviously, that they weren't reporting this back when it happened. And they were pushing that. I mean, the only people who were really going hard on Joe Biden and telling the truth was Fox, but MSNBC, even CNN, they were definitely not talking like this back then. Although they saw all this, they weren't talking like that. And then this woman says, what makes you think it wasn't the first time that Joe Biden, in regards to the debate, had an episode of dementia? Listen, yo, at the end of the day, all this stuff is out now. Trying to deny it at this point. Now, I give props to the young lady, this young lady here. I give her props to the woman on the left, because some people are realizing at this point, if you are a proud Democrat and you want to bring some credibility back to the party, you have to start admitting what was actually in front of our own eyes. It was one of the strangest elections in history, and going forward, I think there's always lessons to be learned. At the end of the day, it's over now, and Trump is president. We'll have another president in 4 years, or a little less than 4 years. But being honest with American people, admitting mistakes is, I think, important, because if you want to save Joe Biden's legacy, it is what it is. It ain't great, but all the people who are around him, closest to him, I think the reason why they're telling the truth now, one, because it's safe to tell the truth. It sells books, and maybe somewhere in history, they don't want to be on the side of history that keeps lying and denying. Lying and denying is what the Democrats have done, and that lying, denying, and being mad at Trump, and ultimately, at the end of the day, that's not a play that's going to last forever. So, this is interesting, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. There's going to be more books after this. So believe you me, more and more is going to come out. Like I said, that book already came out about Barack not wanting to endorse Kamala, which we all knew, but more details from people inside and close to the Democratic Party. The details of what we already knew, I think, are going to be coming out more and more. But let me know what you think in the comments. Crucial Convo.